Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jonathan Koan. I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. This is Meeting the Guests of Honor panel. And so I'm going to have them go down the line really quickly, introduce themselves very briefly. So we'll start with you.
Hello, I'm so sorry, I forgot my tag. I'm Becky Rench. I am the lead scientist for astrobiology at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. That basically means that I'm responsible for managing NASA's efforts in the search for life elsewhere. And I think I'll leave it at that. It's my first LibertyCon.
Yeah, well, maybe Mars had life a long time ago. It had oceans once, didn't it?
It definitely had bodies of water, flowing bodies of water a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay, I'm Steve Stirling, Sansbury. They asked me what name to put on the books, and I said, oh, just do it the way I signed the contract. So that is why I'm SM Stirling. I'm an author. I've been doing it full-time since '88. Published my first book in '84. I had a diversion into a law degree, which my mother thought would give me something to fall back on. Luckily, I haven't had to fall back on that because it would be prickly. Hated it, despised it. I write time travel, science fiction, alternate history, and fantasy. And that's a broad category.
Hi, I'm Jim Holo, author. I write science fiction and fantasy. I co-authored the Gray Division series with David Weber, and I co-authored a number of things with my wife Heather, who and some of those I will actually admit to.
Hey everyone, I write under 3 different pen names. I write sort of clean, fun fantasy adventure as HP Holo, and then a spicy fantasy adventure as Eating Sky, and then super spicy fantasy adventure as Arcadia Sky. But I think I'm most well known as Eating Sky at this point. And yeah, when I'm not like writing fantasy, I'm also becoming increasingly known for just being a nerd for talking about author marketing. And that is me.
Hi, Sansbury Smith. I forgot my card. I write mostly post-apocalyptic fiction. In my past life, I worked for Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I was doing disaster mitigation work, which gave me quite a few ideas of how things could go badly for us. And a lot of those ideas became books. Probably my most popular is the Helldivers series. Not related to the game. I get that question all the time. I actually wrote the series before the first game came out. The second game is way more popular. And I also get the question, does it help book sales? And yes, the answer is it does. I've been at quite a few conventions where people have talked to me about the game, thinking I was the writer, and at one point I just let them talk because it happens a lot. But I also know from my Extinction Cycle series that was self-published and then got picked up by Orbit, Hachette. Now I actually just got the rights back a couple months ago, so those books will be republished. I also wrote an alien invasion called Orbs. I've done quite a few different series. Those are just a few. And I'm a dad. My 2 little kids are here with me. My daughter turned 5 yesterday, so I'm a little tired right now. We're from Iowa. But I'm really happy to be here, so thank you.
So my first question is directed specifically to our 4 authors, which is when you were younger, before you became a writer, who were the authors and or series that were influencing you? So we'll start with Mr. Stirling.
Oh, I started with Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs. And then I branched out to Poe Anderson and Heinlein and a bunch of others. I actually got to know Poe. He advised me when I was starting out. He's a surprisingly sophisticated writer. He started out writing like action adventure, pulp fiction stuff, and he developed very, very rapidly. And sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Like what series or authors influenced your writing?
Yeah, well, that's about it. Oh, and Harry Turtledove, good friend of mine, and I really like his stuff. And I've written collaborations with Dave Weber and Jerry Cornell and Anne McCaffrey and Dave Drake. And boy, were they different. Dave Drake gave me a 35,000 word outline for a 120,000 word book. And that's what he did for himself, too. And every scene was described. And then I wrote a book with Anne McCaffrey, and she sent me a 2-page outline. No.
So, I'd say the first book that really influenced / inspired my writing was when I read Frank Herbert's Duel. And that was just like, wow. Because I think before then I was mostly reading whatever I was told to read through the school curriculum. And it's, I think where I started to realize, oh, reading can be enjoyable. After that, a whole bunch of Terry Pratchett, and I also discovered David Weber, which, wow.
That worked out.
Yes, it did. It worked out very well. I discovered him with the Starfire series. I think the first book of his that I read was In Death Realm, and that was just, so much action. It was just like everything that I wanted out of a book at that point in my life. And I decided I kind of wanted to do something that, like that. And so I started exploring writing in military sci-fi around that time.
So I started writing very, very young. Like I lucked out in elementary school and had a whole string of teachers who would assign us spelling word stories, and we had to use all our spelling words in the story every week. And I knew I wanted to be a writer in 4th grade when I started working on this one story, and it kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going, and I started to panic because I needed to turn this story in the next day, but it wouldn't stop. And so my first memory of writing is associated with abject terror. But all that to say, one of my earliest influences was actually Norton Juster and the Phantom Tollbooth. Specifically because I really, really love clever wordplay. And I love double meanings, I love puns, and that particular book, I didn't even realize how huge an influence it was until I reread it right after Juster's passing. But I was like, oh my gosh, I can trace every bit of wordplay in my modern writing back to this story. And so that was a huge one. But in terms of other things that made me want to write from that era, like the Goosebumps series, the Animorph series, as I developed though, Terry Pratchett was an enormous one because I really loved the way that he combined absolute fun, enjoyable fantasy with really, really astute social commentary. And so yeah.
Have any of your teachers read your E.D. Sky books?
I don't know, to be honest. They haven't mentioned it if they have.
I started off reading Goosebumps to R.L. Stein. I was fortunate enough to be at New York Comic Con 2 years ago. He's from New York, so he goes to, I think that's like the last con he's really going to. But then as I got older, S.N. Stirling, I was telling you earlier, I read, I'm a huge fan of Terminator, and I think you did the best Terminator books out there, for sure. But yeah, they were fantastic. And then Dies of the Fire 2 was a huge inspiration on me. I got into, when I was a little bit younger, I read like, kind of, I would call it B-rated science fiction, like Doom and some of those video game style books too. I enjoyed those. So I've read a lot of hard science fiction. My favorite book of all time is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, who I've also had the privilege of meeting. He's an amazing guy too. I've been reading science fiction since I was a little kid, and I never thought ever that I would be sitting in this chair. I kind of got into publishing when Amazon first opened the gates, I guess, to KDP. I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I'll talk more about that if anyone's interested in coming to my talk on publishing on Sunday. It's at 1 p.m. I believe. Yeah, I've been inspired by a lot of different people. Apocalyptic is my favorite genre, and that's what I write mostly.
So my first question for our artist, John Kovalic, is what was the first art that you remember, or artist that you remember that influenced your artwork?
It was my mom. My mom was an editor at Wesleyan University Press for a publication called My Weekly Reader, which, oh, okay. Sorry. For My Weekly Reader, which was a kid's weekly publication. And my mom was not actually the artist for this strip. It was a comic strip called Hops. It was a very simple comic strip aimed for kids, ages, I'm going to say 5, 6, 7. But my mom would do these little doodles of this rabbit for the artist to work off of. And so she would always include little doodles in notes she would write to me. There would always be drawings around the house. Original art from the strip would be around this house. And I just thought it was really cool. And that was my first experience of art as a means of actual communication. Boy, after that, it was definitely Peanuts. It was, Peanuts is just the GOAT. It was a magnificent strip, and even when I was 8 and 9, reading, just looking at Schultz's incredibly simple but also extremely expressive art, like saying so much with so few lines. And even though I didn't completely understand the depth of some of Charlie Brown's psychoses, I could feel it through the art, and it was just magnificent.
And for Dr. Rench, what was the event or the thing that got you into STEM for the first time?
Yeah, so whenever I was little, so I grew up in West Virginia, and I have this very vivid memory of seeing a comet held above our house whenever I was little. And it was so clear, and I thought it was so amazing to like be able to look at the stars and see all of these changes. That got me very interested in space and science. Ultimately, really, the other piece though is Captain Planet was a big influence on me as a kid. I really wanted to save the earth and be an environmentalist, and that really led me down the STEM path. And then whenever I was in high school, because I was interested in STEM, this internship opportunity presented itself with NASA as a high schooler. So where I grew up in West Virginia, there's a facility called the IB&D Center. NASA has centers all over the place, by the way, all over the country. And so I did this high school internship with them, and I ended up paired with an astrophysicist at West Virginia University named Dr. Littleton, who has since passed away, but he was an amazing mentor. And that whole summer, as like a 14-year-old, we just like looked through the telescope, and Mars was very close that summer, and so I ended up during the day just doing lots of research about Mars as a planet and what was going on, and came across the science of terraforming, which I thought was like the coolest thing anybody should do. My views on terraforming have changed, and I'll tell you all about that. But that's whenever I found the science of astrobiology and thought, wow, like you could be a scientist and you could like search for aliens all together, and it could be real as like a career path, and that's really what set me down that path.
So for each of our authors, I want to ask you to tell us, what was the first ever story that you sold professionally? Or at least, if you didn't sell it, maybe what was the first that you published professionally? You're an author, right?
I sold a story through Marion Zimmer Bradley in 1981, but she made me rewrite it. And looking at it, I think she was right. And then I sold my first novel in 1984. 83, it was published in 1984. And I deliberately restricted myself to 2 viewpoint characters in 2 weeks because I didn't think I was qualified to do anything more complex at the time. And then I sold a story to Penguin, a book to Penguin, and then I was writing the 2 sequels, and they changed the editors, and he said, oh, we got some Arthur C. Clarke reprints, so. And then I published with Bain for a while, and then in 1998, Jim Bain really took against my book, Island of the Sea of Time, and he said, I can't make the readers eat shit. And it's in its 38th printing right now, so. Wow. Penguin. Yeah, I sold it through Russ Galen to Penguin. And then I've been doing it full-time since then. Originally in artistic poverty, and then I got New York Times bestsellers and managed to get a little more affluent.
So, first work that got published, we self-published it, was a military science fiction novel, which was poorly titled The Dragons of Jupiter because it had nothing to do with dragons. It had a lot to do with Jupiter, but nothing to do with dragons, so that was a mistake. The first thing that was basically professionally published was my collaboration, my first collaboration with David Weber, which was the Gordian Protocol.
As for me, I've predominantly been self-published just because the genres that I write in tend to excel more in self-publishing than they do in traditional publishing. My first ever publication was a collaboration between me and Jacob called The Wizard's Way that was a young adult steampunk fantasy. But in terms of stuff that I sold that other people had to evaluate, I will say it was Raconteur Press invited me to contribute a short story to their Giant Freaking Robots anthology. Unsurprisingly, it's very appropriate to what I write. And so the story that I contributed was actually, it was called I'm in Love with a Helicopter. And it's one of my, this story really astonished me because its inspiration is I played Armored Core 6 and the tutorial kicked my butt a lot. And which is typical of FromSoft games, they're really demanding games. But this tutorial beat me so hard that I eventually kind of developed this Stockholm syndrome reaction to it, and I'm like, I love this helicopter that's trying to blow me up. Like, I'm determined. It's a very toxic relationship. Like, I still plan to blow up the helicopter. But when Raconteur Press invited me to write in this anthology, I was like, I know what I'm going to write. It's going to be a helicopter mech, and I got to figure out how to make this work. And so that was the story that sold. And then surprisingly, it actually won awards that year, which is really astonishing for a short story with that origin. But I've continued to publish short stories with Raconteur Press. I've been in a few Bang anthologies since then. And so most of my traditionally published stuff, or at least not self-published stuff, has been short stories.
I got started in self-publishing, and this was my second book that came out called Orbs. That book sold to Simon & Schuster, and I ended up buying 2 more and some short stories. And I've kind of gone back and forth between traditional publishing and self-publishing. But Orbs was the very first one, and I don't recommend anyone here read it. Honestly, I can't. I was learning how to write, essentially, and I think the story was good enough that readers liked it on Amazon, and it went viral for a period of time. And then, of course, I rewrote it too once it went to Simon & Schuster. My editor had me rewrite a lot of it, and that editor ended up moving to Orbit and Hachette, and ended up buying my next self-published series called Extinction Cycles. things a little bit backwards, where some authors will get an agent and query their books out and find a publisher that way. I've self-published, and those sales have somehow gotten attention of publishers that have then bought those books. I have done it the other way though too, where like Helldivers was traditionally published from the beginning. That was pitched out to every publisher basically, and pretty much everyone said no to it. But the one that said yes, Blackstone, I'm very thankful they did, because that's been my bestseller. It sold over 1 million copies in audio alone, so I've been very fortunate in the way I've done things to find success. But trying to think if there's anything else. I wrote some stuff when I was younger that I wouldn't really consider talking about within getting published at this point. I guess I think words is where it all began.
Yeah, but that's an illustration of how publishing has changed. Because when I started out in the 80s, self-publishing was the kiss of death. And it's not anymore.
I didn't know it existed. How do you self-publish? How could someone self-publish back then?
They paid a lot of money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it
print on demand?
No, that was before print on demand.
They call it vanity publishing.
Yeah, they called it vanity publishing back then. And it was, as I said, the kiss of death.
If you've ever read Foucault's Pendulum, it discusses that issue. I think there was a very predatory vanity publisher in that novel.
Oh, yeah.
So, John, what was the first piece of art that you were officially commissioned for?
Oh, God. I think I'm still waiting on that one. I started out drawing comic strips for my high school newspapers. I was very fortunate because growing up in England, the high school I went to had a bi-weekly newspaper, and so I was getting an early comic strip of mine every couple of weeks. Then when I started at the University of Wisconsin, they actually paid. They had a daily paper, 5 days a week. So daily for the weekdays. And it's like, wow, this is terrific. I like this. And so yeah, I went through college, working for the Daily Cardinal. My first comic strip, Wildlife, was briefly syndicated for a couple of very painful years by Chronicle Features. And I was too young to really know what it takes to make a successful daily comic strip. And they had never worked actually with the comic strip. The Chronicle Features had success with Gary Larson on The Far Side. And they were having some success with Bizarro, which was kind of like once Larson left. And I would just, by the way, I apologize for being late, but for a cartoonist, that's very on point. But I would always, the other thing is I made a huge mistake, because I also had a comic strip, the same comic strip, Wildlife, running locally in our city paper, which was actually paying me less than the Daily Cardinal University paper paid for. But I was trying to keep both of these going while still being a feature writer at the paper and an editorial cartoonist. And it was just a miserable, miserable time. Essentially doing 14 comic strips, 3 or 4 editorial cartoons, 4 or 5 feature stories for the newspaper. And I honestly don't think my career really took off until I quit the newspaper. And I'm glad. I quit the newspaper in the mid-1990s. And considering the newspaper contraction that's happened since then, I would have been one of the very first people kicked off. But I think my career really began when Shadis magazine, the gaming magazine, was looking for a comic strip that dealt with games. And I had, at this point, had 10 good years of doing comics behind me. And that's when my comic strip, Dorn Tower, was first published. And everything since then has just been super terrific. And I don't have to do 14 comic strips a week anymore.
So, Becky, how did you get involved with NASA specifically?
Oh, yeah. So, so I told you about how I got interested in astrobiology. So, once I was on that trajectory. NASA was the primary place that I was interested in being. So I was pretty laser focused in wanting to do astrobiology for NASA. I did everything I could in my undergraduate career to learn basically every kind of science, because astrobiology is very interdisciplinary science. So I have undergraduate degrees in biology, chemistry, and geology. And after that, I went and I did an internship. Another internship, these NASA internships are very good ways to get in. And I participated as an intern at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland on the Curiosity rover and preparing for that. It has an instrument on board called SAM, which is Sample Analysis at Mars. And so I spent my time as an intern basically putting samples through a similar system to create a database of baselines that the instrument would then be able to use to decide what it had detected on Mars. So I got to participate again. And then I went to, after doing a couple other things, I went to graduate school for astrobiology at Penn State and spent my time there really doing research in caves, microbiology, earned my PhD and realized actually that as much as I loved science, I did not really enjoy the deep dive that so many scientists tend to do whenever your career is the bench. Whenever you're a scientist, you tend to have one very, very, very specific question that you're trying to answer during your career, and you spend all of your time diving really deep into that question. And I did not like that. I wanted to know things about extremophile microorganisms and how you detect exoplanets. So I really wanted to do all of that, and so I altered course a little bit and went towards science policy and spent some years doing science policy work in the Washington, D.C. area, and actually had a really awful job for a little while. And in order to get out of that, this opportunity presented itself at NASA headquarters to be a policy analyst. So I applied for that and was able to get my foot in the door, and then realized I'd gone a little too far away from the sciences and that I wanted to get closer but not quite back into the bench. And so a program scientist role in the planetary science division opened up, and it was a perfect fit. It was the right balance for me of science management and enabling activities, but also getting to really apply my scientific knowledge. And so I've been doing that now for the past decade. It's been great.
So Steve, you have your biggest series, which is the Emberverse, which has 15 books in it, and it was published over the course of about 15 years. So my question for you is, how did your writing style change between Dies the Fire and Sky Blue Wolves?
Okay, I wrote my first novel when I was in high school. The English teacher got 4 of us together and said we were all going to write a novel, each individually. And we'd meet every 2 weeks and read it and discuss it. And it was a terrible novel, absolutely awful. But I learned a lot doing it. And that demonstrated to me that the only way you could learn to do writing was writing. So I wrote the Nantucket series, Island in the Sea of Time, Against the Tide of Years, and oh God, I've forgotten the third title. And
Game of Thrones.
and then I wrote Dies the Fire because I wanted to explore what happened after Nantucket went back to the Bronze Age. And I just got a series of ideas in my head, visions, that sort of thing, and put them together, and that's what it did. You learn by doing. There's really no other way to do it. You just learn by doing. And I think my plotting skills and character descriptions and so forth have gotten better since Dies the Fire, but that's a matter of taste. And I wrote 15 books in that series, and and branched out.
So, Jacob, you've been working with David Weber for about 10 years on the Gordian Protocol series, which is split up into two parts. You have I think it was the protocol books, and then you also have the file books. How did that series get started, and why did you all decide to split them into the two?
Oh boy. Okay. So, David and I, we met at a convention. It was a small local convention, and now defunct. And the reason why we were there is Heather was recovering from surgery, and she had had a lymph node biopsy, and was basically recovering from essentially a hernia. And well, you may have noticed that she.
Let's say, Jacob.
So she's very energetic, and
No idea.
She hides it well. And well, long story short of that part, she had a very severe case of cabin fever, and she is very susceptible to cabin fever. So it's like we need to go to this convention. So I'm like, no, you should really continue to rest and recuperate and whatnot. I was basically having to hold out my arms as support for her to kind of get out of seats and go back into seats. And she said, David Weber will be there. You can get your copy of In Death Ground signed. I'm like, oh, okay. Yes, you win. So we went, we got in line, and he was actually handing out free copies of On Basilisk Station, which I had already read, but I got my free copy, and I put In Death Ground in front of him. It was this, dog-eared thing that had been through the ringer a few times. One of the few books that I'd read multiple times. And what followed was the shortest conversation that David and I have ever had. He said, whoa. And then he signed it, and then we went off and the TRMN fan club was there, and it said, oh, you two are authors? Well, you need to go talk to Sharon, David's wife. And we're like, no, we don't. No, we absolutely do not. And so they dragged us over, and we sat down and we talked to Sharon for a while, and about an hour later, she's like, what, we should do lunch sometime. So we did lunch, and then we did another one after that, and basically the four of us became friends. Fast forward, we're basically we were at, I think, at Chili's celebrating your birthday. And I had just received a manuscript rejection from Bain. I was asking David, would you be willing to read it and basically tell me where I need to improve things? He's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then he had this impish face. I had never seen that face on him before. All right, and I'm like, what is going on here? What is this face? He said, you know what? We should write a novel together. and I almost threw up.
It wasn't Chili's.
No, the food was fine. And he suggested the basic concepts that would become the Gordian Division series. And what he didn't know at the time is that I had once sworn to myself that I would never, ever, under any conditions, write time travel. Because I didn't want to have to deal with time travel's drama. So of course I responded to him, why yes, David, I think this is a wonderful idea. And we started writing it. After we wrote the second book, the Valkyrie Protocol, things escalate pretty substantially from book 1 to book 2. And Dave's like, you know, if we keep going like this, we're gonna run out of apocalypses to throw at our main characters. Like, okay, yeah, you got a point there. And then you know, we're like starting to work on the plot for book 3. And then he tells me, oh, by the way, I always planned this as like a police procedural. I'm like, what, David? You never mentioned this to me. So, like, okay, well, I got my homework from Tony to read certain, you know, police procedurals, and I read mostly a whole bunch of Ed McBain's 87 Precinct novels, which I, you know, was like, oh wow, yeah, these are good. And then we came up with a proposal, and then that became the kind of file books. And so you had those, you know, you had the protocol books were like the big existential threats, and then you had the file books that were the more
Police procedure.
yeah, tightly focused police procedural style novels.
So Heather, you've been working in the indie space that you were talking about earlier. Can you tell us what you've learned from like a business perspective are the things that typically really work, whether it comes to marketing or publishing, or some of the things that you've learned that have really not worked?
Oh, I can say a lot. This is an activating question. So it's a big question too, because one of the things that I have found, like overall, is sometimes it's really hard to give out marketing advice because what works for one author doesn't work for another, and it'll come down to any variety of things. For example, advice that works for one genre won't work for another genre. And so it'll be things like that. It ultimately comes down to the individual author and how they choose to either interact with their fans or not interact with their fans. Like, when I say not interact with their fans, I don't mean be reclusive. I mean, like, as opposed to making short form videos on TikTok, whether you decide to go into Facebook ads. And that was kind of, in terms of my own experiments with marketing, one of my biggest strengths is that my marketing strategy is throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And another version of that is I will frequently tell authors who ask me for marketing advice that you can't get discouraged because 90% of what you try will absolutely fail, but the 10% that works will absolutely work. And for me, the 10% that absolutely works is using a foundation of well-designed and optimized Facebook ads. And that was my bread and butter for years. And then randomly in this past December, I went viral on TikTok, which is how I discovered the strength of short form video. And that has a lot of complexity to it, because one thing that I found that, you giggle over there. Jacob is accustomed to hearing me talk about, like, I have a TikTok limit that I can talk about, and it's not like I'm showing him amusing TikTok videos. It's like I'm tired of hearing TikTok stats. But short form video is really, really interesting to me as a thing that works continuously, because not all of your videos will take off as an author, but the thing that making, for example, a short form video every day does is it keeps you present in the minds of your readers. And that consistency alone has been one of the most powerful marketing tools for me. The consistency of posting and my personality. My specific personality sells my books more than the books themselves do. And I think that's a really important thing for authors to learn. Especially in one of the greatest challenges facing authors right now is the rise of the influx of AI generated content that is coming. And I firmly believe that the thing that modern authors are going to have to do to have any chance of having a career in the new paradigm is they're going to have to interact with their readers. They're going to have to firmly develop an audience and show their readers that they're cool people. And I think short form video is really useful for that. But that's only something I've literally discovered over the past 6 months. And in terms of stuff that doesn't work, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work. But there's stuff that has absolutely not worked for me, has absolutely worked for other authors. So it's hard for me to say this technique is terrible, this technique, don't ever do this technique. That's my short answer.
So for Nicholas, you've written a lot of books that have kind of military and a lot of action overtones, and so I wanted to know what is it that whatever the subgenre is that what is it that intrigued you to include military elements?
It's what I grew up reading, what interests me, and one thing that I've learned as this has become a career is that readers know when writers don't like what they're writing, and there's been a few times where I've written a long series that I knew it was time to end it because I was no longer enjoying writing it day to day. And also there's one series, just to be honest, Lit RPG, I tried to jump in on the bandwagon there. I thought I could do a good job, and that I did not enjoy that at all. So I actually I didn't cancel my contract with the publisher with Audible for that. I just swapped in a different book for it. But military, and that wasn't military sci-fi. I just really enjoy action and having a lot at stake. And most of the time, what I'll do is I write a pretty simple formula for all my books. It's third-person past tense, usually 1 or 2 POVs, sometimes 3 POVs, and one of those POVs is always someone that's in the military. And I do that to keep the pacing kind of breakneck throughout, because I always have action in those scenes, and I also usually have a scientist as a character as well. So that's kind of been the formula I've used throughout my writing, and when it works for me, it's because I enjoy it, and that's what I grew up reading. And I think that's kind of my advice to authors too, that ask me about like writing to market. Like, you can write to market, but you better hope you like doing it, because when I tried to write to market with LibertyCon, not only did I not like it, but I did not do a good job doing it. And I think that was a mistake that I should have done more research ahead of time. But with all the other books I've written, post-apocalyptic just feels like, this is gonna sound weird, but it feels like home to me. I don't know why, maybe it's because of where I used to work, but I mean, any sort of media I grew up reading, playing video games, movies, it was always military science fiction, post-apocalyptic.
So John, can you tell us how you got started with the Dork Tower?
Sure. I've been doing comic panels for a couple of gaming magazines back in the early 90s. I've been a role-playing gamer since 1978 with the first little white box of Dungeons & Dragons. And growing up in England, I played a lot of miniature historical wargaming, mostly World War II. There are a lot of wargaming clubs all around the United Kingdom, and every weekend there would be like in some church, in some village, somewhere reachable by bridge trail, you could go and have a small historical gaming convention. So the gaming aspect has always been in my blood, and with my old comic strip, Wildlife, the one which was painfully syndicated for a couple of years, all of the jokes, well, most of the jokes were self-deprecation. If I'm going to punch, I'm either going to punch up or punch at myself. And most of it is just, hey, I'm leading a kind of ridiculous life, and there's a lot to make fun of. And so I was at Gen Con in Milwaukee, and I'd had some panel comics published in this magazine called Shadis, long out of print, as are most of the magazines I've ever worked for. No correlation there, and quick that. And they had just lost a comic strip called Knights of the Dinner Table. Jolly Blackburn, a friend of mine who drew the strip, took the strip and formed his own publishing company, essentially with Dave Kenser. And an editor, DJ Drindle, asked me if I could come up with a gaming comic strip. And I was like, wow, that's a good idea. Yeah, I think I could do that. And I didn't want to import my old characters from the Wildlife strip because they're all badly drawn anthropomorphic animals. But I kept Carson the Muskrat who's a character I've drawn since high school in 1976. And yeah, just Dork Tower started running bi-monthly in Shadis. And then it was picked up by Dragon magazine. And then from there I started self-publishing my own, actually no, first the comic books were published by Corsair, was the publisher. And around issue, I want to say 10, maybe a little bit earlier, I just thought that I could do a better job publishing it myself. And back in those days, in the early 90s, it wasn't that difficult. I was very lucky. My entire career has been very fortuitous. Just never going to deny that. But I had two distinct markets. I could get my comic books into comic book stores, and I could get the comics into gaming stores. So it turned out self-publishing at that point was not a bad way to go, and I eventually ended up publishing something like 250,000 copies of the comic by the time I quit around issue 36. And by that point, it had evolved into a web strip anyway. So, but I quit the self-publishing when my child was born. It's like, you know, the one thing I really didn't enjoy about the whole creative process was the business aspect of it. So I kind of miss the long format stories, I would say, we do. But I've kind of learned also how to turn some of the web strips to link them into similar sort of long format stories.
And my question for you, Becky, is at NASA they have their plans for what's coming up with the Artemis missions, they have the plans for the moon, but I wanted to know what you know, what is something that NASA's working on that hasn't gotten the public spotlight, but is a really cool thing?
Oh, make it a secret.
Oh gosh. So you know, one thing I always tell people with the search for life, right? Because everyone's always like, "Oh, did we already find aliens?" And I'm always like, "If we had, we would have told you," because we would be way too excited to keep anything close hold. So we're a very transparent agency in terms of everything we share. I think, you know, some things that maybe folks haven't heard about that are very exciting. You will probably catch some of them in some of my talks, so I'm just going to go into some of those. One is Dragonfly. If you all aren't familiar with this mission, it's very, very cool. Titan is a moon of Saturn, and it's one of the coolest places in the solar system because it has rain, it has lakes, it has rivers, but they're made of methane and ethane. They're not made of water. And so it's a very, very interesting world, and Dragonfly is an octocopter that is going to go there. It's being built right now, and it's going to land in such an awesome way, because it's like going to like come into the atmosphere of Titan, which is very thick, and then the octocopter is going to like drop, and then it's going to start flying, and then that's how it's going to like come in. So like just like a very cool landing scenario. So if you're not familiar with Dragonfly, that's one. And then the other one that I'm really excited about is Habitable Worlds Observatory. This is a very much just in the mission concept stage. We do something at NASA and in the science community called the Decadals. This is where the National Academies of Science every 10 years gets a bunch of scientists together, and they talk about what the priorities should be in that particular science area for the next 10 years. And so the astronomers and the astrophysicists got together and said that the next big great observatory after Roman, which launches in later this summer, should be this Habitable Worlds Observatory, which is a telescope that would be so precise and capable that it would be able to directly image Earth-like planets around sun-like stars. So think a planet around a star somewhere else, and it would be able to look at that. And in order to make that measurement, the telescope has to be so stable that it cannot move more than an atom. So it has to be so so stable in space that it does not wiggle any more than the width of an atom, which is quite an amazing technological feat. So those are not secrets by any means, but those are two things that maybe aren't getting hyped that I think are really awesome.
With the stuff at Artemis, have you noticed like a change in tone at the agency when it comes to the excitement, or has it been kind of steady recently?
Well, things have not been steady. It's been quite a few years, honestly, at NASA, just kind of ups and downs. Anytime there's an administration change, we get different priorities and different directives, and so we're very used to that. But I would say we have had a lot more ups and downs more recently, and so. But all of that being said, there's a lot of excitement. Everyone is very excited about Artemis. I will say, coming from being more of a planetary scientist, I've been I'm not gonna say that poo-pooing, but not as excited about crewed exploration as I am about robotic exploration, because robots can go and do things that humans just can't do. But watching the Artemis 2 crew go around the moon was very inspiring for me, and it got me really excited about what we can do with crewed exploration. So I'm very excited about that and how we can use that to feed forward to Mars, which is more of an astrobiology target that I'm interested in.
So I want to go ahead and take a few minutes to open it up to questions. So does anybody have a question for any of our panelists? Yes.
This one's for Becky. Vis-a-vis terraforming. Yeah. I read Kim Stanley Robinson in the 90s, the Mars trilogy, and I have to ask you, in your opinion, is this ever really going to be a viable strategy? Given the energies required.
Yeah, so whenever I was young 14-year-old Becky, I thought terraforming was this awesome idea, and then I actually really started to understand the science and the reasons of why you might go about it, and it's not really a very great idea, to be honest, mostly because most of the reasons that I would come up for of why you might want to terraform have to do with trying to save humanity, trying to make another basket to worry about something. But if you have the capabilities to terraform a world like Mars, you have the technology and the capability to solve whatever problem it is that is your issue back here on Earth. It's a lot easier to fix Earth than it is to make anything like Mars or Venus or Earth-like. So it's got its own problems in that sense. The other question in terms of capability and whether or not we could get there, this is actually a very common debate I have amongst my scientific colleagues, because most people have some ethical concerns about terraforming and whether or not you would do that, but also see a lot of value in the science that we can learn through the thought exercises of terraforming and geoengineering. It can really help you create a better model of a planet. It can help you even, like I said, think about ways that you might solve planetary scale challenges here on Earth. So there's a lot of value in it. It would take a lot of resources to make something like that happen. Most of the things that would work well are basically tossing asteroids into a planet, putting them on some sort of trajectory. Yeah, exactly. Because you need to input a lot of energy into the system in order to make it be more Earth-like. I mean, one of the beauties of our planet is that we have an abundance of energy here. If you compare us to Mars or Enceladus or Europa, the energy flux that you see in Earth is just so much more than you get at any of those other bodies. And so that's part of the reason why whenever you look at our biosphere, it's this huge global signal, whereas even if you think there might be life on any of those other places, there's just not enough energy to make it so that they have a robust biosphere. So if we wanted to take one of those other worlds and make them into something that's more like ours, there's a lot of energy input. And so you really got to ask yourself, like, what's the reason that you need to be doing that, as opposed to building a giant space station, you know, where people are going to live, or you know, so many other things that would probably be in the solution space for whatever it is you're trying to solve for Terraform.
Not having to fight a gravity well on each end.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions? Yep.
So, start at the end, because you were talking about Audible, particular with around the Helldiver stuff. How did that engagement go? How did you get involved with the audio stuff?
For Helldivers?
Yeah.
At that point, I'd had a couple other audio series that were pretty successful, so my agent was able to get an audio deal where we actually got the option on who to pick for the narrator. Like, there was a bunch of different narrators that submitted samples, and it was an amazing list of people. Bronson Pinchot was my first narrator, and then Ray Porter was on the list, who's also done some of my books, and then R.C. Bray, who did The Martian, and it was R.C. Bray that I thought would be perfect for Helldivers, because he has this gruff, like, Santa Claus type voice, and he did an amazing job. So I just got really lucky. It honestly had to do with sales again. I don't think if I hadn't had a series that sold well in audio before, that I would have had that sort of input on who the narrator could be, and nor would the publisher have spent that amount of money to get a high caliber narrator. So that's basically how it worked with Helldivers, and that ended up being my biggest hit ever. I didn't even know it was happening at the time. I was in Mexico. I can't remember, this was probably 2016, 17, and all of a sudden Helldivers was #1 in the entire Audible store. I did not know what was happening. It was a daily deal, and book 2 was out at that point, and then the series really took off, and it hit the New York Times list, I think, at book 4 or 5, and then things started to trickle down after that, but those, I feel like, were the glory days of military science fiction, post-apocalyptic, back in 2016 through 2018. Then the market really shifted to lit RPG, and I feel like a lot of readers went that direction. So it was just a really great timing and opportunity for me. Good question.
Awesome. Any other questions?
I just wanted to speak on the Oceans of Eternity. I just looked it up.
Yeah, okay, good.
Well, we can go another hour or end it here. Podcast.
I have a question.
Yeah. What?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Becky, I'm not going to steal this idea. I'm curious, as a scientist, what's like the craziest, coolest science fiction story that you've never read or that's not out there that you could think of? Or like, have you ever considered writing a book too? Because you have all this knowledge that I feel like normal people don't have. Like, you're like Andy Weir, basically. And, you could write a story that's super realistic, that might have an angle that no one else sees. Like, just listening to you talk about asteroids and comets inflating them or whatever to create the energy for terraforming. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, because I've read about terraforming.
You and Heather could collaborate and do an octocomic for
Yeah. I was going to say, unless I quit my day job. As you know, I have 3 small children who are here with me, and so I honestly, I am in awe of you all in terms of writing books. Like, I mean, I think it's amazing. It's definitely on my bucket list, but I think it's probably more of a retirement thing. I would love to collaborate with others that would be interested in doing that sort of stuff, because I think they're super fun topics and very interesting. I think, you know, in terms of like ideas or things that I've thought about. Okay. So we were just talking. We were talking about time machine, actually. One of the things I've thought a lot about is how whenever we explore for other intelligent life or other life in the universe, there's a time dilation between when we get the signals and when things are happening on those home planets. And so one of the thoughts I've always had is how cool it would be to write a book from both perspectives in real time, but that where they don't know yet about how they're going to be communicating later on. If that's making any sense, sorry. It's like, because if it takes, 40 light years or something in order to do this, right? You're always like 40 years behind. And so, like, imagine having a discussion with an alien where you're talking to them and you're in the 1980s, right? But then the next chapter of the book is learning about what they're doing in their real time.
Yeah, that's really
So anyway,
That's an
I
awesome
think
idea.
I think time dilation and how it relates to what's going on in situ.
And you're the time travel guy.
Yeah.
All three of you. Get busy. Make it so.
The Forever War had some of that in it.
Yeah.
That was your idea as an author. I couldn't think of one. I don't know how that'd be a very difficult story to tell. It would be very interesting to pull it off.
Yeah.
It's bad enough sitting in the same amount of voyage or return an instrument and wait for 2 days before we know that it did.
Yeah.
All right, well, can each of you go and tell us what your next panels are this weekend? We'll start with you.
Yeah, I forgot my little.
It should be on the back.
Oh yes, thank you. So my next panel is tomorrow at 1 p.m. I'll be talking about exoplanets in terms of how we detect them and any sort of recent developments. And so that's in meeting room 6 tomorrow at 1 p.m. And then I'll just also plug after that at 6 I'll be talking about Chiava Falls, which is the potential biosignature that we found on Mars last year, which I'll we're talking about.
My next event is apparently drinking heavily at the parties on the 16th floor, followed by ill-advised karaoke. I've got a 1 p.m. There's going to be a tour of the art show. I've got a number of panels up with original art from Munchkin and Dork Tower and various other projects. Then at 4 p.m., what's new from Steve Jackson Games? And Steve and I will both be on that. And then, of course, there's going to be the art and charity auction. And Steve and I will be auctioning up more appearances on Munchkin cards, as well as the original art for the badges and t-shirts this year will be up at the charity auction. So please, 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 it's all for a wonderful cause. And I love conventions like LibertyCon, which are so invested in local charities. It's just wonderful.
Can I?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to be heard?
Okay, I have, let's see, 9 o'clock. What if there was no Rome in Ballroom E over in the Convention Center? And then from 10 to 11, Making the Darkness Light, which I presume is about my latest time travel series. And then tomorrow, guest of honor brunch banquet speeches. Oh God. And then from 1 to 2 tomorrow, How History Works, which is largely accidents. And then from 2 to 4, Bain Traveling Roadshow. And then from 4 to 5, historical research on how it affects world building. And then from 10 p.m. to 11, musings on Nantucket and the Emberverse. And then on Sunday at 10 a.m., the Cafe Clash. And from 1 to 2, World Building for Alternate History. And then at 3 o'clock on Sunday, I'm going to be doing a reading.
So, Heather and I, tonight, 10 p.m., we will be doing the readings. And tomorrow, at 4 p.m., we will be exploring the worlds of Edie Sky and Jacob Holo.
Are the readings like Arcadia Sky or E or HP?
Where can you prepare for
I'm going to be bringing an excerpt from my latest Eating Sky novel, and I have no idea what Jacob is reading. Are you reading from Cat Girls from Outer Space?
Maybe.
You should.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm
Probably.
going to be reading from a Titan Mage series, and he's going to be reading from Cat Girls from Outer Space. So it's going to be an experience.
Yeah, it'll be good fun.
See, I have a reading tomorrow. I will be reading Helldivers 1. That's at 1. And then I have an autograph session after that for Destroyer of Worlds. That's a post-apocalyptic panel. That's at 5. And then on Sunday at 12, I'm doing a presentation on hybrid publishing, which I'm excited about, but I think it's probably the most boring thing I do here for people. So hopefully some people will come out and find it interesting. And then I have an autograph session at 1 on Sunday.
Can I also just add, since everyone else did Sunday too, on Sunday I'll also at noon be giving a talk on a planet by planet walkthrough of the solar system and how each body in it relates to astrobiology.
All right, thank you all for attending, and thank you all for being participating.